Okay, well, welcome back for part 2 of our series entitled The Difference Between Intelligence and Wisdom. Now, the last time that we got together, we started talking about some of these differences, right? The most influential factors being what? Maturity and discretion. Intelligence is going to be the first one to correct you. Oh no, a tomato is a fruit, not a vegetable. But only wisdom is smart enough to know not to put it in the fruit salad, right? It was noted that a lot of people spend a lot of their lives questioning everything in an effort to show how smart they are. But I think we all agreed that this was a very counterproductive approach, right? Yet more proof that light does travel faster than sound, because lots of people appear to be really bright from a distance until they open their mouths and we hear what they have to say. We talked about God's greatness, right? And how our very best efforts to completely grasp God's greatness was about as realistic and noteworthy as our vertical leap in an effort to get to the moon. We also discovered along the way that while we might be intelligent enough to nod our heads in agreement with that analogy, the much deeper truth is that our hesitancy to respond to His voice and to follow His lead more accurately represents the truth about what we really believe regarding God's greatness and His abilities. We considered an approach to worship that included telling God that while we know we're not capable of giving all the praise and the honor and the glory, that right then, right there, we're going to give everything we have to get as close as we can. This is the recipe for those authentic worship interactions that will leave you spent but still experiencing that peace and the contentment that can only come from having been in the presence of perfection. Now, this week I want to talk about some things that will happen when you finally get to the place where you give it all away in complete trust for whatever He asks. Some things that you can expect when you make and deliver on that promise. You see, for many people, worship, it's a chore, an inconvenience. At best, it's just a task that all those people who say that they go to church and say that they love God, that's what they have to do. But as much as I used to be there, now worship has evolved. And now, time worshiping before God in the deep silence of my cave downstairs in my office, just listening for those words to offer in respect and admiration, in reverence and gratitude, in dependence and obedience, truly, without a doubt, these times are the most valued, most treasured moments of my day. Over the last couple of years, God has taught me a lot about this connection that He's designed and assigned to me. I have been the recipient of some very cool messages that I believe were meant exactly for me at exactly that time. Now, there are 5 distinct stages that have sort of materialized in my everyday worship experience. I start with acknowledging and submitting to God as a whole. God is Father, Son, and Spirit. All right, the 3 distinct parts, yet one God. All right. Now we don't have time to go into all this right now, but I love the topic of the Trinity. If you want to know more about this, you contact me. We'll get together, and I promise you, at the end of that interaction, you will see God and want to pursue Him in a way that you never thought was possible. Okay, now, where was I? Yeah, stages, right, okay. So, after acknowledging the holiness and the sovereignty of God Almighty, El Shaddai, submitting to El Elyon, God Most High, I spend a little time addressing each part, God the Father first, then the Son, and then the Spirit. Over the last year, I've been working especially hard to try to develop my understanding of God the Father in an effort to honor Him and to worship Him just better. All right? What a ride this has been. Growing up in religious church, I had no clue about this concept of relationship beyond the carrot, right? To ask Jesus into my heart so I could go to heaven when I die. But I did learn some very cool facts about God and who I thought He was. Anybody who's actually been to church, even if you've only been once, all right, most people understand that the Bible proclaims that God created the heavens and the earth, man and all the plants and all the animals, right? If you've tried to go beyond that, if you've listened to anything, if you tried to read the Bible, then perhaps you're familiar with some of the other miraculous things that God did. There were times that He took armies that were not good armies, and He turned them on themselves so they just imploded, right? Just destroyed themselves. He took the Israelites and He led them out of Egypt after 400 years of slavery, and then across the Red Sea. That was kind of a 2-for-1, right? One day. He met with Moses face to face on top of the mountain and gave him those stone tablets with the 10 Commandments, and he carved with his own finger. Wouldn't you love to see those? Just, they're somewhere. They're buried in that ark, wherever that is. He made and He fulfilled an unprecedented and yet still unmatched promise to Abraham. He dictated all the terms. He established and maintained all the boundaries when poor Job got volunteered to be the example of how the hierarchy in heaven works. You know, it was in that guy's life, right there, that God proved that not only how we can, but how we should believe that God is attentive to every detail of our lives. Okay, what else? He gathered 8 people. Ooh, 8 people, right? Not a big deal. Now listen, Noah and his wife, their 3 sons and their wives, right? I think that's 8, all right? And listen, an estimated 70,000 animals into the ark. He closed the door behind him, flooded the earth, and a little more than a year later, let them out and let the whole thing start all over again. Throughout the Bible, we read how God delivered His prophets from some real nasty dangers, right? Like vindictive queens and some really big fish. He took His chosen people and He led them through the desert for 40 years. 40 years! Their shoes and their clothes didn't wear out. They were never without food or without water. And He eventually brought them to the promised land that He really intended to give them a whole lot sooner. He caused donkeys to speak. He caused axe heads to float up out of the water. He knocked down an entire city's encircling wall without so much as a single effort, a finger's help from man. He took Joseph from privileged brat to prison rat to eventually the second in command over all of Egypt. Now, the stories and the details go on, but there's one thing that was in common through all of these stories that I learned. Right? It was that nobody bothered to tell me what part of God this was that did all this stuff. Right? Do you understand that all the things that I just described, that it was Jehovah that did all this? Why is that a big deal? Look, if you understand, Jehovah means ever-present Redeemer and Intercessor, right? He's the same one to whom we refer as Elohim, God the Creator, who is also Jesus. Do you get this? Jesus, the one who came to earth, who was falsely accused and persecuted, who was tortured, murdered on a cross, Jesus. Do you get this? Do you understand He's the one who created it all? All right, look at Colossians 1, 15-23. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For everything was created by Him, in heaven and on earth, the visible and the invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through Him and for Him. He is before all things, and by Him all things hold together. He is also the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn of the dead, so that He might come to have first place in everything. For God was pleased to have all His fullness dwell in Him, and through Him to reconcile everything to Himself by making peace through the blood of His cross, whether things on earth or things in heaven. Once you were alienated and hostile in your minds because of your evil actions. But now He has reconciled you by His physical body through His death to present you holy, faultless, and blameless before Him. if indeed you remain grounded and shifted away from the hope of the gospel that you have heard. This gospel has been proclaimed in all creation under heaven, and I, Paul, have become a servant of it. Okay, now, where am I going with all this? This Jesus, right, the one who created it all, and then came to rescue it all, made it clear that he did so on orders from his Father. Do you get it? The mission was to complete. He was to complete the mission his Father sent him on, and there was no varying from those instructions. Are you getting this? So, if you understand, then if Jesus is the one who did all of these amazing things, created it all, performed these miracles, did all this stuff, and a bazillion other things that I don't even have time to list, right? If he is the one that did it, does this begin to impact your perspective, to cause you to try to mentally grasp how great, how awesome, and how powerful his Father is? All right, now why am I saying all this? This is all important with the story that I began to tell. All right? Over the last year, I've worked especially hard to try to develop my understanding of God the Father in order to worship Him and honor Him, in order to give Him more of the credit that He deserves for the stuff that He does in my life. But the problem has been this. As I've gotten to this place where I wanted these words of respect and admiration, these awesome words to come pouring out of my heart, it's like everything just froze. It just kind of got a cramp. No matter how I tried to label or acknowledge or recognize this concept that is so far beyond my comprehension. I mean, I know all this great stuff about Jesus, right? And I know that there's so much more about Him and His power and His might. I can't even begin to inventory them. So how am I supposed to even get a handle on His Father, whom He lives to please and to honor? It's like my best efforts to come up with the words fail, like using the word valley doesn't quite capture the immenseness of the Grand Canyon. Or the word fast doesn't really grab the speed of light at 168 or 186,000 miles per second. Now, I've got an analogy, right, that helped me get past the cramp. But in order for me to give it to you, I've got to talk about some things that are going to seem unrelated at the beginning. All right, but I promise I'm going to work really hard to tie these all together and to make the point. Are you game? You good with this? All right. Since I've already mentioned it, anybody here already been? Have you actually been to the Grand Canyon? Yeah, I haven't been. I've seen some really great pictures and I've seen some really great footage. But I've never been, and even though I haven't ever been there, I still don't think that we have the words that actually represent the greatness that is the Grand Canyon. And while I don't believe we have the actual measurements, there's enough sources that have come up with about the same numbers for the dimensions. So for the sake of our analogy today, I'm going to use the average consensus of what's out there. Is that all right? Okay. The National Park Service estimates that the Grand Canyon is 277 miles long with an average depth of 5,000 feet. That's about a mile. The average width is about 10 miles, although that some places in there have been measured to be up to 18. We're going to use 10 as the average. All right. When we take those measurements and we convert them into feet, we get 1,462,560 feet long, 5,000 feet deep, 52,800 feet wide. All right, a simple volume calculation of length times width times depth will give us an estimated cubic feet for volume. All right, now I'm not going to give you that measurement right now. I'm going to bring it out here in a few minutes, but I'm going to skip that. But when we take that number, that cubic foot number, and we convert it back into miles, what we get is 2,623.1 cubic miles. All right, you get this? Envision the distance, a mile long, a mile wide, a mile high. That's the block. Now, we take 2,623 of those and we put them together to represent the whole that is the Grand Canyon. It's overwhelming, isn't it? All right. Are you good with this so far? All right. If your brain can grasp that, then let's see if you can wrap your head around the estimated the volume of cubic feet in the Grand Canyon. But before we go there, I've got to make sure that we're all kind of on the same page mathematically. So let's just do a very quick review. The term 1 million is 10 sets of 100,000. All right, we're good with that? All right. The term 1 billion is 1,000 sets of a million. The term 1 trillion is 1,000 sets of a billion. All right, that's just almost beyond comprehension, but you're at least good for that one? All right, set this one off to the side for just a second. We're going to come back to it, I promise. But I want to talk about something that's at the opposite end of the spectrum for size. All right, let's talk about sand. There's all kinds of sand in the world. There's white sand and brown sand and black sand. There's fine sand and coarse sand, wet sand and dry sand. I guess I'm sounding like a Dr. Seuss book by now, huh? All right, let's listen. I'm talking about the average regular sand that the average person can find at the average beach, whose width is about 1 millimeter wide. All right, we're all familiar with that size, about 1 millimeter, right? For a little bit of perspective, how many grains of sand do you think fill up just 1 cubic foot? All right, 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot. All right, well, it's easy to figure out. If we've got just a standard measurement of our sand being 1 millimeter wide, there are 300 millimeters in a standard linear foot, right? So, again, our basic volume calculation will tell us that 300 by 300 by 300, so 300 cubed, what is that? Anybody? 300 cubed? No? 3 cubed? Yeah, 27, right. 27 million grains of sand per cubic foot. Are you getting this? All right. Slide that one off to the side next to our little math test. We're going to come back. All right, but now I want to talk about something a little different. I want to talk about water. The United States Geological Survey estimates that 96.5% of the water on the planet resides in what we call the oceans, right? Now, a cubic mile, we started to talk about that a few minutes ago with the Grand Canyon. A cubic mile, 1 mile by 1 mile by 1 mile, right? A cubic mile will hold a little more than 1 trillion gallons. Crazy, right? 1 trillion gallons. Now, the United States Geological Survey estimates that there are 326 million cubic miles of water on the planet. So that means that if there's a trillion gallons per cubic mile and there's 326 million cubic miles of water on the planet, that means the estimate is 326 quintillion gallons of water. Well, what is that number? All right, 1,000 millions is a billion, 1,000 billions is a trillion, 1,000 trillions is a quadrillion, and 1,000 quadrillions is a quintillion, and they're saying 326 quintillion gallons. Yeah, I don't even get it either. All right, it's nuts. But conceptually, you begin looking at this, and go, wow. All right, one more thing, just one more tangent. I want you to follow me, okay? And then I'm gonna try to lasso it all together and make some sense of it. If we can agree that one of our tears is the same volume as the liquid that would come out of an eyedropper, right? Then we at least get to agree that there are 80 drops per teaspoon. That would give us 768 teaspoons per U.S. gallon for an estimated 61,440 drops or teardrops per U.S. gallon. You get this? Okay. So this is where I'm going with all this. One day, as I was searching for a way to honestly but humbly try to quantify my ability to understand God's greatness, right? Yeah, great task. God floated this picture into my head, right? As I approach God, my Father, the holy and sovereign God of all, the best efforts that I have on my very best day is my tear in the ocean, the 326 quintillion gallons, the ocean of my Father's greatness. All right, now the picture's not over. All right, while you stumble over that one, look at this. The second part of the picture was me in a helicopter floating over the Grand Canyon, right? And I flicked out my grain of sand into the immenseness that is the Grand Canyon. All right, 277 miles long, 5,000 feet deep, 10 miles wide. All right, now here, listen. This is where that cubic footage figure didn't come in before, of the whole of the Grand Canyon. Are you ready? 386,115,860,000,000 cubic feet. At 27 million grains of sand per cubic foot, my best effort on my best day is my grain of sand in the Grand Canyon of the Son, my King's greatness. Well, you let that one settle. I wasn't able to come up with any conclusive data for snowflakes to blizzards, right? But while I offer my tear in the ocean of the Father's greatness, my grain of sand in the Grand Canyon of the Son's greatness, I offer my snowflake in the blizzard of the greatness of the Holy Spirit. Are you beginning to see now what I mean when I say that anything less than our very best in worship is just plain unacceptable? Does that start to make sense now? Do you want to hear something really great, though? Listen, this is the great part. God's not mad. He's not even slightly disappointed that we can't fill up the ocean or fill up the canyon or even represent in the blizzard. God is greatly pleased when our greatest desire is to show up every day, to pour out everything we've got, every grain of sand, every tear, every snowflake, just to honor Him. I wanted so badly to have something of value to say, something that would begin to express my gratitude for the forgiveness that He alone arranged, the Father, when He allowed His Son to come and die in my place. I wanted something to begin to show my appreciation for the fact that He allows me to call Him Father, just because I accepted His gift and I committed to follow His Son with everything I've got for the rest of my days. I want so badly to bow before this awesome and mighty and holy God and have something to say to Him. He who has more knowledge and more interest in my life than I do. Something that would begin to show my appreciation. But you know what? For the longest time, I couldn't say anything. Are you beginning to understand what I mean by the word cramp now? Now listen. With this new perspective, my grain of sand, my tear, my snowflake in the blizzard. Look, I don't have much to offer, but it's my best. And with this new perspective, the Holy Spirit has begun to coach me and teach me. And He's given me these things to say that made me feel like not only do I have something of value to offer, but with my whole heart, I'm telling you, I believe there's things I get to say in worship that nobody else on the planet gets to say. Not because I'm all that special, but because when we choose to pursue God in worship, when we choose to connect with Him the way He created us to worship Him specifically, incredible things happen. Along the way, God has taken some stuff that I've offered in worship to Him, and He's floated it back into my heart in a way that I really wasn't able to handle this. To have that direct interaction with Him. For Him to say, not only does He love me, but that loving me is amazing. My heart couldn't take it. I just couldn't hold it together. There was another time I was completely convinced that while I was bowing and I was just in conversational prayer, just listening and responding to whatever the Spirit was saying to me, I was completely sure that my head was in His lap. That presence was so supernatural and it was so tangible. It was everything I could just to hang on to it. Just recently, He did it for me again. I was in worship and I was running after Him with everything I had. From the most sincere place I could find in my heart. I was remembering this analogy that He'd given me a couple of weeks earlier that I used in a message. Some of you might have heard it. It was the analogy that my life is kind of like that dog who is at risk of being destroyed at the pound, right? You remember that? I was that dog. Sitting in the cage for the offense of being alive and unclaimed, and I was destined for destruction if someone didn't come and prevent it. Jesus came into my life, and He rescued me. He took me home to His Father, and now I have a home where I am never afraid. That's the truth. I'm not afraid. Now, here's where I was. So I'm worshiping from this place in my heart. As honest as I could, I'm pouring it out. I'm telling God that I know I can't give you all of the praise and the honor and the glory that you deserve, and that I am just your rescue dog who does not deserve to be here. I'm just being honest. Now, I had the Hebrew word do, and I had the Hebrew word for done, but I didn't have the Hebrew word for does. So with this heavy, raw emotion in my heart, as I'm pouring out my heart, I have to pause, and I'm typing the English word into my software, expecting it to spit out the transliteration so I can finish the phrase, does not deserve to be here. I type in the word, and my computer spits out this phrase, does not need to be ashamed. I broke down at my desk and I sobbed. If worship is just check the box time for you, defined by a couple of songs that you sing before Sunday morning service, if that's all worship is to you, you are missing out on the most extraordinary experience that a human being can ever have. Worship should be a pursuit. A pursuit, like you see a father and a child playing in the park, right? The kid's chasing the dad around in circles and around the trees. And eventually, the father slows down enough and the kid runs into him, and they fall down in this embrace, and their laughter fills the park. If you're not experiencing this in worship, then you, my friend, have not yet discovered the way that God created you to worship in authenticity and consistency. Hundreds of people, it seems, in my life have quoted this verse, Jeremiah 29:11, and claimed this as a verse to give them hope and encouragement in life. You've heard it, but let's look at it again. Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans that I have for you. This is the Lord's declaration. Plans for your welfare and not for your disaster, to give you a future and a hope. Now, I do love the truth of this verse. But God has taught me the value, the miracle that is the two verses that follow this. Jeremiah 29:12 and 13. You will call to me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with your whole heart. Chase after God with your whole heart, desiring to worship, to honor, to compliment, and to submit. Then identify the areas that define your life and put them at His feet for whatever He asks. Well, what does that look like, right? All right, look, I have sort of mentally inventoried the aspects that define my life. All right, my boxes look like this. I put them in boxes so I can systematically and intentionally give them away piece by piece and make sure that nothing's left out. All right, so here's what my boxes look like. Box number 1. My marriage, my family, and my finances. These are all gifts from the generous hand of the Father, and I will do whatever you say with and for them. Box number 2. My purpose, my dreams, my desires. Everything I am, everything I have, and everything that you will ever allow me to become. God, just allow me to not have anything that comes between us. Allow me to not chase anything but you. Box number 3. My daily schedule. All right, now this starts to get a little crazy because I have my list, right, and the order in which I think things need to be done every day. But I now ask God every day to show me His list for whatever number day that is. Today was 17,245. God, show me your list for this number of my days so that I can do exactly what you want. Now, this has taken some intentionality and a little practice on my part, but you have no idea how freeing this has been. I am so completely learning to live in the moment to see things for what they really are, to no longer see conveniences and the distractions and the disruptions to the agenda of what I thought it was supposed to be. Look, I'm getting to a point in my life where I don't want to be responsible for writing the list. I just want to get the list so that I can do what I'm supposed to do for the day. If I will just follow him through the day, the funniest thing, right? The stuff that's got to get done, it always mysteriously does. Okay, box number 4. My word and my obedience. All right, these are the only 2 things that God has put under my complete control and management. The same goes for you. You really need to think about this concept for a bit. The fact that your word and your obedience, all right, they're in your complete control. Nobody else manages them. All right, think about that. We'll come back. But listen, every day I make a promise to God. I tell him, see if you can bite this one off in truthfulness in your own life, right? I tell God that if you will allow me to know that it's you leading, there is nothing too great for you to ask of me. Nothing that I won't do and nothing that I won't give up for you, my word and my obedience. All right, box number 5. This is the last one. My freedom and my health. All right, this was by far the most difficult box for me to give away, to put completely in the bag and to walk away and say, I'm letting go of this one. But now, I choose to believe, to trust in your promises, in your wisdom, in your love, and in your attentiveness to every detail of my life. I refuse to dread the unknown. Now, these encompass the aspects that are my life right now. As if or when something shifts or changes, so will the boxes and the contents, to make sure that there's nothing that comes between us and prevents me from following him completely. Now, your boxes are going to differ to at least some degree. Identify and include every part of your life. Put it in some boxes and put it at his feet for whatever he asks for the rest of your days. When you can get there, when you can give it away without holding anything back, then the goal becomes to come and do it every day. Make the submission of your whole life the non-negotiable object, the non-negotiable focus before you do anything else in any of the rest of your days. Push a little harder. Give a little more until your whole life is at his feet. When you finally get here, then make sure that you don't start any other day any other way. When you get here, something miraculous happens. When you arrive at this place where you give it all away, you're no longer content with the knowledge, just living with the intelligence that God is always completely trustworthy. You're now living in the wisdom that never pauses to question it. I don't see worship as something that I'm supposed to do. Worship is the safest place on earth for me. The place where I can be exactly who I am. Defective, flawed, helpless, but more importantly, acceptable in the eyes of my Father, my Creator, my inspiration, and my God. My Father never fails to show up. He never leaves me hanging. When I show up with all I've got, when I'm all in to discover some new way to honor Him that I haven't before, you will seek me and find me when you seek me with your whole heart. Seek God with your whole heart and see if He ever allows you to run out of ways to reflect back to Him how awesome He is. Pursue God in worship with the intent of catching Him and see if your laughter doesn't fill the park. Holy Father, God, you are sovereign. We exalt your name above everything else. And we thank you for what you continue to teach us. What you continue to show us is your truth about this relationship you want with us and how this is supposed to work. God, I pray that you would allow these concepts of worship to soak deep into our hearts. That you'd allow us to run after you with everything we've got, just believing, just choosing to believe that you are going to continue to feed us and allow us to hear and have those offerings to give back to you that honor and please you. I ask that you just take this word that you've given us today and allow us to soak on it for the rest of the week. That it will become this new addiction for us, that finding new ways to compliment you and new ways to honor you from the authenticity of our hearts would become the highest priority of our lives. We ask all these things in the name of the Son, Jesus Christ, so that you might be glorified.